It grows up to 3 meters tall, forming an impenetrable wall of thorns. Farmers used poison, fire, and heavy machinery. Yet the more they attacked it, the more furiously this weed grew back, swallowing everything in its path. And yet today, on that very same dead land, stands a vast old-growth forest, with 47 waterfalls flowing year-round, generating $1 million every year. The truth is, not a single person carried a shovel to plant trees. And that terrifying weed? No one even bothered to destroy it. It eliminated itself and disappeared completely. How could a destructive weed end up building an entire paradise with its own hands? Let's uncover this unbelievable mystery right now. This land was not merely barren. It was actively destroying itself. The previous owners had done everything according to accepted standards. Gorse, a weed native to Europe, had spread completely out of control. For the past 80 years, the only advice had been simple: destroy it. People sprayed chemicals across the grasslands. They used bulldozers to flatten the hillsides. They set fires along the mountain ridges. But none of these methods worked. The more it was attacked, the denser, faster, and farther the gorse grew back. It formed enormous walls of thorns that blocked every living creature. Eventually, 53% of the property was completely covered. The farm officially gave up. Everything seemed hopeless until Maurice White, an accountant who wanted to buy land to protect birds, arrived with botanist Hugh Wilson. At that time, less than 1% of the original forest that had once existed in this area was still surviving. 99% of the native vegetation had completely disappeared after a century of livestock grazing. But while surveying the thorny growth towering above his head, Wilson saw something that every other farmer had overlooked. And what he discovered did not merely restore this land. It also contradicted nearly everything people had previously applied from biological science. Beneath the dense canopy of gorse, in the dim shade, the young shoots of native trees were quietly pushing upward. No one had planted them. No one had watered them. They were simply growing. Tree species that could never survive out in the dry grasslands were thriving inside the protective barrier of this invasive weed. Wilson realized an incredibly simple truth: gorse was not the enemy. It was an agent of ecosystem recovery. This plant belongs to the legume family. It has the ability to draw nutrients from the air and channel them directly into the soil. On land exhausted by livestock, gorse was the only plant capable of taking root and restoring the soil. Moreover, standing 3 meters tall with its dense armor of thorns, it created a remarkable natural fence, preventing sheep, cattle, and deer from rushing in to eat the tender native seedlings. The pattern was unmistakable. Gorse grows extremely fast during its first 10 years. But after that, its stems become too heavy. The plants collapse under their own weight. Their canopy opens, allowing sunlight to reach the nutrient-rich ground below. Gorse needs direct sunlight to reproduce. And it cannot survive in the shade. But the shade-loving native seedlings can. They rise through the fading gorse, block out the sunlight, and eventually take over the entire habitat. The gorse gradually dies away, turning into the perfect fertilizer for the new forest. Once he understood this, Wilson made a remarkably bold decision: do nothing at all. As long as livestock were kept away, the gorse would build a new forest on its own, then step aside on its own. But when he announced this plan, outrage erupted. Local residents sent countless letters condemning the idea. They believed that seeds from his land would be carried by the wind, spreading an ecological threat to farms throughout the surrounding area. For 9 long years, skepticism surrounded him. The thorny thickets remained the same familiar shade of yellow. Nothing seemed to change. In 1988, a severe drought swept across the region. Livestock on neighboring farms became weak and exhausted. The fields turned to dust. In that desperate moment, Hugh Wilson, the man who had once faced fierce opposition, opened the gates. He allowed his neighbor to drive starving cattle onto his land to graze on the little grass that remained. This act not only transformed his relationship with the neighbors, but also marked the beginning of an extraordinary transformation. By 1997, the pattern Wilson had predicted began to appear. In the oldest areas, the gorse started collapsing in large patches. Sunlight broke through, native seedlings surged upward toward the light. Within just 10 years, the neighbors who had once believed the process would take half a century could now see native trees sprouting in the most barren places. By 2016, comparison photographs had made the truth undeniable. One image taken in 1988 showed a hillside completely covered by millions of yellow thorn bushes. Another image taken in 2016 from exactly the same location showed an entire frame filled with deep green native forest, with trees towering above head height, and not a single trace of the thorny plants remaining. He removed grazing animals. He prevented fires. And he left everything else for nature to resolve on its own. The entire budget over 40 years was spent only on fencing and trapping invasive rodents. Not a single dollar was spent on planting trees, reshaping the land, or spraying chemicals. The results far exceeded those of any project driven by human intervention. The original 109-hectare property has now expanded into the 1,700-hectare Hinawai Reserve. 350 native plant species are thriving, 35 bird species have returned, including the rare New Zealand falcon, which arrived naturally. But the hydrological transformation is even more astonishing. As the forest grew, tree roots began holding water in the soil. From only a few tiny trickling streams at first, the reserve now contains as many as 47 powerful waterfalls flowing throughout the year, even during the hottest part of summer. And this is where the story extends far beyond the boundaries of a single island. What happened on this land unexpectedly aligned with the latest findings in global science, revealing a mistake worth billions of dollars that humanity is still making. For decades, the world believed that restoring nature required strong human intervention. We spent enormous budgets raising seedlings, tilling the soil, and planting every tree by hand. But modern evidence tells a completely different story. Recent global ecological studies have shown that natural regeneration costs about 70% less than planting forests by hand. More importantly, naturally regenerated forests store more carbon, retain more water, and achieve far higher tree survival rates. When people plant trees themselves, mortality rates are often high because the wrong species are planted in unsuitable soils or climates. When nature takes over, the best seeds emerge naturally in the places where they are most likely to thrive. Today, without planting a single tree, the Hinawai Reserve earns approximately $1 million each year by selling carbon credits. This success is not an isolated coincidence. Hugh Wilson's story closely matches some of the largest ecological restoration experiments taking place around the world. At the Knepp estate in the United Kingdom, a similar project shocked Europe. In the early 2000s, the owners of Knepp decided to stop farming, stop clearing the land, and simply let blackberry thickets and thorny shrubs take over. Just like gorse, Britain's thorny scrub had long been considered worthless. Yet it created the perfect biological barrier. Oak seedlings sheltered beneath the thorny cover, protected from browsing deer. The result? Thousands of oak trees emerged from the thickets. The land recovered, and many of Britain's rarest bird species returned. And if you think this applies only to peaceful landscapes, the next example may change your mind. What happens when people are forced to leave because of the most severe disasters imaginable? Take the Chernobyl exclusion zone. After the nuclear disaster in 1986, Scientists predicted that the area would remain lifeless for centuries. Radiation levels were high enough to threaten human life within just a few hours. No one was allowed to enter. No one cleaned it up. No one intervened. But what happened next defied almost every prediction. Without people cutting down forests, hunting wildlife, or spraying chemicals, Chernobyl has grown into one of Europe's largest wildlife refuges. Packs of wolves, brown bears, lynx, and the rare Przewalski's horses now roam among abandoned buildings. Today, wildlife density there is even higher than it was before the nuclear power plant was built. Or consider another equally extreme example: the demilitarized zone separating North and South Korea. This strip of land stretches 250 kilometers long and 4 kilometers wide, fenced with barbed wire and filled with millions of landmines. For more than 70 years, almost no one has dared enter it. The result? This dangerous buffer zone has transformed itself into a pristine ecological paradise. Endangered species such as the red-crowned crane, the Asian black bear, and even the elusive Amur leopard, animals that have become extraordinarily rare elsewhere on the Korean peninsula, are living undisturbed within the fenced-off region. The astonishing truth revealed by these examples is this: the everyday presence of humans, with tractors, herbicides, and land-clearing equipment, can sometimes place greater pressure on ecosystems than even the most dramatic catastrophic events. The common thread linking all of these stories is an incredibly simple principle that people rarely accept. The ugliest stage of a landscape, when it is covered with weeds and thorns, is often the very moment it is healing itself the fastest. Weeds are the land's temporary protective layer. Once the wound has healed, that protection quietly disappears on its own. If allowing the land to regenerate on its own is truly that simple, that inexpensive, and that unbelievably successful, then why didn't the rest of the world follow Hugh Wilson's approach from the very beginning? Why do governments still spend billions of dollars every year on chemicals and artificial intervention? The answer does not lie in scientific knowledge, it lies in human psychology. Researchers call it action bias. Our instinct is to believe that we must always do something to solve a problem. When we see a barren piece of land, we feel compelled to pick up a shovel, dig into the soil, and plant a tree with our own hands. Governments and large corporations behave the same way. It is easy to attract funding and appear in the headlines when you launch a grand campaign called Plant 1 Million Trees, but you cannot hold a ribbon-cutting ceremony simply to announce we are going to do nothing at all and let this wild vegetation grow. Doing nothing is often seen as laziness, even when the evidence shows it is the best possible approach. The consequences of this urge to intervene can sometimes become some of the most expensive environmental failures imaginable. A striking example came in 2019, when a Middle Eastern country launched a massive campaign to plant 11 million trees in a single day to set a world record. Thousands of people took part. Yet, only a few months later, independent organizations inspected the project and uncovered a bitter reality: nearly 90% of those trees had completely died. They had been planted in the wrong soil, at the wrong time, and without enough water to survive. Humans had tried to do nature's job, and the outcome was exactly the opposite of what they had hoped. That is why what Hugh Wilson accomplished in New Zealand is so extraordinary. He was not merely standing against his neighbors or challenging government policy. He was going against humanity's own instinct to interfere. Today, Hugh Wilson is 81 years old. He still lives in a solar-powered wooden house in the heart of the reserve. He still writes newsletters by hand for thousands of supporters around the world. Throughout his entire life, he has never planted a single tree. The farmers who once despised him now run tours that guide visitors through the very forest they once wanted to erase. The son of the neighbor who opposed him now spends his days recording the songs of birds that his family had not heard for generations. No giant machines, No chemicals. Sometimes, the most powerful decision we can make for a degraded landscape, the one that shapes its future more than any other, is also the one that demands the greatest courage. Take our hands off it, give it time, and allow nature to do what it has always known how to do. If this remarkable story has changed the way you see the world around you, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next astonishing discoveries. And if you think this video was worth your time, don't forget to leave a like. See you in the next video.